I just watched the latest piece of content manufactured by Disney, and it was fucking good. Yeah, cynical intro, I know, but I fucking love the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and I just want to talk about everything I fucking liked about this movie. I'm not the biggest Marvel Disney fan, but this exceeded my expectations in every single way. Let's just talk about the lead up to this movie. This movie kind of went through a production hell, if you will. A few years back, James Gunn was fresh off of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and then he got fired for some inappropriate tweets that were from 10 years ago. Everyone lost their minds, and I was like, do we not understand that this guy used to be a B-movie director? Shock value used to be his source of income. But anyway, went over to DC, made the Suicide Squad movie, came back to Marvel. They rehired him because they realized how stupid a mistake they did, and now he's coming at them with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which was a bit of a reason for skepticism and doubt that this movie was going to be good. It's never good when you have a bad breakup and you come back to the relationship ever. It's never that good. Meanwhile, Disney has been struggling with their films. I haven't seen many of their films since Endgame, but I have seen the 2 Spider-Man movies which came out since, which in my opinion were quite bland. And I think that the latest Spider-Man movie was just fan service with not much substance to it. And then the other movies I watched were Black Panther 2. I wanted to revisit that world. I was interested in it, and it was risk-taking in some regards, but ultimately it just felt like a bit too messy and a bit too much studio interference. And I also did catch Doctor Strange 2 because I am a Sam Raimi nut at the end of the day, and I thought that movie was abysmal. I did not like the new Doctor Strange movie, and it really felt like Sam Raimi had his hands tied in that movie and couldn't go all the way with the Sam Raimi-isms. But fortunately, that's actually not the case for this new Guardians of the Galaxy movie with James Gunn. I'm a big James Gunn fan. I love Slither. I love Super. 2 flawless movies in my opinion. And then he did the 2 previous Guardians of the Galaxy movies, which I do like, but I always felt like they were a bit too tame by James Gunn standards. I always felt like he had his hands tied with those movies because even though he is this very extravagant director with a very predominant style with violence and vulgar language, and it is a Disney movie at the end of the day when it comes to those first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So while I do like them to a certain extent, especially the first one more so than the second one, they had the reins on the horse a bit too much in those 2 movies. And then he went over to DC, made Suicide Squad, and I think Suicide Squad, until this movie, was his best comic book adaptation. I like that Suicide Squad movie quite a bit. Not only is Guardians of the Galaxy 3 the best MCU movie in a while, I think it's up there with me with Iron Man 3, but we'll get to that. But I think it's one of the best movies of the genre. When Iron Man 3 came out, that was not a Marvel movie. That was 100% a Shane Black movie. And that movie got a lot of mixed reception. A lot of the Shane Black elements of it didn't resonate with people. And I feel like since then, Kevin Feige, who organizes the MCU, kind of put a leash on his directors. Up until this new era of Marvel where they're just cranking out shit for the sake of cranking it out, directors have started to take more liberties because an overseer can't manage that many projects. So I haven't seen the latest Thor movie, but from what I heard, it was really just a Taika Waititi movie. And again, it didn't work for most people. But James Gunn is a different director. He's a director that I am more fond of compared to Taika Waititi. When I say this is James Gunn Unleashed, this is truly James Gunn Unleashed to the point that I forgot I was watching a PG-13 Disney film, and I just got transported into this fucking universe. It's violent, it's vulgar, and we talk a lot about childhood trauma films in this channel. And I feel like this, if I saw it at a young age, it would be the subject of a lot of childhood trauma. Scenes with animal cruelty. It kind of brought me back to the first Spy Kids movie which creeped me out as a kid, where they have the guy who has a TV show. What was his name? Flip. And they, I just remember that scene where they're fucking deforming people to make them caricatures for the TV show. Flip is a bad guy, help us, save us. Flip is a bad guy, help us, save us. It definitely is more in line with James Gunn's Slither more than the previous two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And again, a lot of people said that about Doctor Strange 2. Oh, it's not really a Marvel movie, it's a Sam Raimi movie. And I didn't really feel that. This is the first one to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, Disney really didn't have any oversight, except a few plot elements here and there, which we'll talk about. But for the most part, it was just James Gunn doing whatever James Gunn wants to do. I remember when Disney first purchased Marvel, it was around the time Iron Man 2 came out. And Iron Man 2 was going to deal a lot with Tony Stark's alcoholism, and they cut a lot of that stuff out, I feel. The movie was supposed to open with apparently Tony Stark puking in a toilet and then jumping to do his convention. And they cut out the scene where he's puking in the toilet and just had him jump to do the convention. So they don't like dealing with alcoholism, which this movie does open with Star-Lord being an alcoholic who can't get over the fact that his girlfriend can't remember him. And lastly, the violence is brutal in this movie. It ends, spoiler alert, I guess, it ends with someone getting their face fucking removed, and it's just a bloody mess. I was like, what the fuck? You're allowed to do that in a PG-13 movie? It reminded me of movies that I liked as a kid, Tim Burton movies, how they're fun, they're light, but they do have horror elements in it, or like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, especially with that subplot with freeing the kids. The stakes in this movie feel particularly elevated, which ever since the Avengers Endgame, the stakes were high in that movie. Half the world disappeared. And ever since then, it's like they're trying to one-up it. Oh, well, the multiverse is gonna get destroyed. Oh, the fucking Galactiverse is gonna get it. I can't relate to those things. But if you have fucking animal cruelty and child abuse, I'm all on board. Fuck this bad guy, you know? At the end of the day, I'm an old chunk of coal, you know? It takes a lot to get me to root against the bad guy. So you gotta go the route of animal cruelty and child abuse. I think that's what I mainly like about this movie. It's James Gunn's style, and it's untamed. It's unleashed. It's gone crazy. It's just he got to do whatever the fuck he wanted. But what is that style? How does it express itself? Well, for one, the costumes in this movie and the character design is really fun to watch. Very creepy, very weird. The horror elements work. Again, that scene where the animals are getting mutated into these Homo sapien-like creatures. That reminded me a lot of Slither. Just the body horror in this movie is very Slither-like. One thing I didn't like about the previous two Guardians of the Galaxy movies is that they do this thing where they'll have a dramatic moment and they'll undermine it with a joke. Something really emotional is happening, and then all of a sudden Drax farts and everyone's like, okay, let's just forget about the emotional moment. Drax did a poo-poo in his pants. That's not the case here. They do it once. It's in the trailer. It's the scene where they're talking to one another, Gamora and Peter Quill. They're talking to one another in their spacesuits, and it turns out that everyone could hear them. That was the only time they did it, but they do it so sparingly in the movie that when it did happen, it worked for me. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it just worked because it was unexpected. The other films, it's become such a trope that you expect the joke to happen after an emotional beat, completely undoing that element of surprise. I had a few concerns going into this movie. For one, I thought it looked very cheap. Star-Lord has a very iconic look with his mask, his long leather jacket, his sideburns that point towards that way. And he didn't have that look, and he kind of looked chubby and disheveled, and he's wearing this kind of Star Trek-y kind of costume. And I felt like everyone kind of looked off. I felt like everyone in the trailer anyway. Everyone, like, Drax gained weight, and Nebula kind of had like a boyish look to her. It kind of felt like a tribute band of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the trailer. It works in the movie. In the context of the movie, it works. That they're wearing these space outfits that kind of look cheaper and stuff like that. The emotional moments is something that James Gunn has mastered by now. I remember watching Super before James Gunn really became a thing. And in Super, I was like, okay, yeah, it's Dwight from The Office. He's got a wrench. It came out around the same time as Kick-Ass. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like Kick-Ass, I guess. But then it really had that emotionally poignant moment at the end where he's looking at his wall and there's like pictures of all the people he saved. And I remember being like, what the fuck? I didn't deserve this. I was going in expecting like some goofy comedy, and they gave me an ending I didn't deserve. And those emotional beats are still in this movie. It's like you're getting everything good about Slither, the body horror, the horror elements, and you're getting everything good about Super, which are all the emotional beats. And you're getting everything good about the previous two Guardians of the Galaxy, which are the fun characters. We love Drax, we love Groot, we love Rocket Raccoon, we love Peter Quill, we love Gamora. And we're getting good jokes, so it's like as if James Gunn just took the best of each of his previous movies and slapped it together in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. The other concern I had going in was that the soundtrack worried me, because that soundtrack of the previous two films is so iconic. You have like that era in the 70s where everyone was like, ooh, outer space, David Bowie music, Electric Light Orchestra, bands like that. And I was worried that if you do the jump to grunge and 2000s music, you're going to kind of lose that. That wasn't the case as well. You still have that element of operatic space music, but it still works in the context of more modern music. The one song in particular that worked was the Flaming Lips song, but even that what was that band? Space Dog in the meantime. Ooh, it still has that grandiose space-like quality to it while stepping into the 90s and early 2000s. Individual moments I like a lot. This might be a little spoilery, but the whole Rocket backstory is really fun to watch. Well, it's not fun to watch. It's really sad and depressing. But it really feels like the stakes are high because of that animal abuse. It feels like, okay, yeah, maybe the whole world isn't at stake, but there's a large portion of people that are going to undergo this fucking procedure, which is horrible. The scene where the High Executionary, or whatever his name, the High Evolutionary, not Executionary, the High Evolutionary is talking with Rocket, and we just see people in the background contorting their body as they're getting evolved into higher species. There's a hallway sequence with Beastie Boys music, and I was kind of like, ugh. I was kind of getting J.J. Abrams Star Trek vibes, but it really worked, that scene. The hallway scene, the action was really fun. Lately, these Marvel movies have been lacking when it does their CGI thing. The CGI in this movie is very merited because there's such a blend of costumes, real practical sets, and CGI creatures. It all blends together really perfectly. So you're really transported into this world. Speaking of transported into this world, this was the best Disney Star Wars movie in some regards. Because one thing I always craved that Disney would do with Star Wars that they never did is get the fuck off of sand planets and show me a different world. That's one thing George Lucas always did, is every time you got a Star Wars movie, you're exploring a different world, whether that's the Camino planet in Episode 2 or the Lava planet in Episode 3. Every movie kind of gave you a different place to explore. And that's one thing that's really unique about this movie, is that you felt that sense of space exploration. You go on this planet where everything is an organism, everything is made of live matter, the costumes, they're walking around looking like all puffy and shit, and the costumes are really badly made, but it really works within the context of this movie. And it also allows for a lot of the body horror that James Gunn is really notorious for. And then there's the suburban planet, which is something I haven't seen. It's just this perfect suburban planet, but everyone's a fucking animal hybrid. And all of those suits were done practically, so it's really fun to watch. It's not a perfect movie. It does have some problems, and I feel like the problems are because James Gunn kind of had his hands tied when it came to the previous Avengers movies, which he probably didn't have much of a role in. For instance, I feel like the Gamora amnesia plot is kind of mishandled. I didn't remember Gamora being that much of a bitch in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and this Gamora is supposed to be the same Gamora as the one in the first movie. So he had to kind of deal with that plot, and because the story is so wrapped up in Rocket's backstory, you don't have much time to explore how Peter Quill is feeling about his girlfriend not remembering him. They have a few moments. I wish they had a few more. And then there's everything concerning, what's his name? Adam, the Gould dude. I didn't get his character. I didn't get his motivation. It's been a while since I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 2, so I feel like if I did watch it, I'd have a bit more context. And then they give a lot of screen time to this dog that has telekinesis. And I'm assuming because the dog had a bit of a Russian accent, I think the dog was supposed to be back when the space race was happening, the Russians or the Soviets threw a dog in space. So I think it's supposed to be a play on that. And I think the dog did have a cameo in one of the previous movies. But yeah, that kind of just caught me off guard because I wasn't too familiar. Maybe it was something that was said on a Disney Plus show, but I was just like, oh, there's a talking dog that's part of the group all of a sudden. Sure, whatever. Yeah, it was just really a fun movie. And as someone who does encourage auteurism in their superhero movies, this is exactly what you want. The Matt Reeves Batman had it, where it really felt like Matt Reeves had his singular vision and brought it to a film. And then you have movies like Logan and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, where it really feels like the directors are telling the story they want to tell. And I can happily lump this movie into that category where it's like, okay, it's not a Marvel movie. It's not trying to tell this grandiose story about fucking Jonathan Majors wanting to take over the multiverse. It's really a self-contained story, and every character has their emotional struggles. One thing I like about all three of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies is that they have this similar theme of this rat tag group of friends that are mismatched. They're all kind of outcasts of their respective groups, but they all come together to fight a threat who believes in a perfect world. In the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, you had Thanos, who had his motivations to create the perfect society. In the second one, you had the Gold people and Ego, who had their visions of creating a perfect society. And in this movie, where you have a guy who's dabbling with eugenics. So it's always fun to see this group of imperfect people go up against people who think they are perfect. But what kind of makes people beautiful is the fact that we are imperfect. So it kind of works as a trilogy because all three movies have that kind of theme, but it doesn't feel repetitive. It really feels like each one has its own singular way of approaching that theme. Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the best MCU movies I've ever seen. A lot of people are going to disagree with it because the pacing is so fast, which is another thing I'm kind of not liking about this movie, is that it moves so fucking fast. But I'm willing to forgive it because I always understood what the characters were going for. I always understood what the character motivations were. So even if the plot moved really fast and I missed a few things because the pacing was so fast, I was always on board with the characters. All the characters worked. Yeah. Best MCU movie, in my opinion. It's a hot take, I guess, but I value auteurism in films, and this is the Marvel movie that probably has the most of that, along with Shane Black's Iron Man 3 and arguably Thor Love and Thunder, but I haven't seen that, and apparently it's a train wreck. Auteurism doesn't always work, kids, but when it does, holy hell is it dank. Alright, I'll see you guys around. Take care.